It is all encompassing. What I like to say, quote I made up for this one, is burnout doesn't discriminate, but it does have its favorites. And we are the favorites. And when you look at it, we being women of color, and especially Black women, when you look at data across anything, Black women were always at they got the brunt of it. So why would this be any different? So burnout is like added pressure. It's added stress, it's added pressure, it's all of the above.
Welcome to the Writing on My Mind podcast. This is where we discuss all things related to the doctoral journey. On this show, I share personal stories and bring some friends along for revealing conversations about their journey and provide inspiration for others to level up as doc students. I'm your host, Dr. Emanuela Stanislaus. I'm a doctorate coach and diversity consultant. I finished my doctorate in 4 years while working full-time, traveling the world, and balancing a busy social life. And now I'm on a mission to create community for other women of color to complete their doctoral degrees. This is real talk to help you along your doctoral journey. Now, let's get to the show. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Writing on My Mind podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emanuela Stanislaus, and today I have a great guest here who I have been fangirling for the past couple of months and super excited to have her on the show. Today we have Erayna Sargent, and she is a speaker, mental wellness champion, and founder of Hooky Wellness, which is your one stop for burnout relief. Personal experience gave her deep empathy for the challenges in the relief journey and set her on a mission to create practical burnout support that meets you where you are. Erayna has an MBA from Indiana University, is a global wellness and institute initiative member, a contributing writer for Well+Good with guest appearances across publications including NPR Life Kit, Thrive Global, and Architectural Digest. Welcome to the show, Erayna.
Thank you for having me. And I just have to say, I appreciate you saying my name right.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a real show, so I have to make sure I do my research and, pronounce your name correctly. So excited to have you on the show today.
I'm excited to be here. Always happy to talk about burnout and bringing greater awareness to it so people can manage it, mitigate it, and sometimes even avoid it.
Yes, and I'm so excited to have this conversation today. Like I said, I've been fangirling you, which I talked a little bit about before we started recording the episode, and went down a rabbit hole of all of your interviews. And I was like, I need to have you on the show because previously, I think I've shared with the audience before how I have personally experienced burnout. I've spent some time reading various books, and you're one of two guests that I hope to have on the podcast to talk about this very topic, because I believe that many doctoral students, particularly women of color doctoral students, are experiencing burnout, but may not know what it is. So why don't we jump right into it and see if you can share a little bit about your thoughts on what burnout is and how you define it so that our audience can kind of get some insight into that.
Absolutely. And I'm privileged to have this audience because those who are in higher ed and going through the programs, you're experiencing it, but it is so integrated into the program that it's sort of an expectation. Similar to how it is in a professional workforce, but even within the educational system. And so if we can start to unravel this and unpack this at this stage, we can start to have that ripple effect of creating change in the structures and the career paths that follow. So I'm really excited to have this audience. When it comes to burnout, by definition, it is a state of mental, emotional, physical exhaustion that is brought about by chronic untreated stress. A couple things that I like to point out just in that base definition is that it is all encompassing. It affects all of your being, hence the mental, emotional, and physical. And then the other thing that I like to point out is that it isn't something that is just a fluke. It is a result of untreated chronic stress. And so I like to shed a light on that because now that we are finally talking about burnout, I find that there's a little bit of not sugarcoating, but in a sense like greenwashing and how everything was sustainable. Now all of a sudden everything's burnout. And it's like, no, there's still a whole stress cycle that is a precursor to burnout. And burnout is the result of not doing anything about that stress. And just like anything else, the earlier you put some systems in place and start to change some behavior, the more you can avoid the intensifying effect of turning it into burnout. So that's by nature of the basic definition. And it took the pandemic for it to be discussed in a wider audience, but burnout was coined in the 1970s, and actually in 2019, the WHO deemed it a occupational phenomenon. So then we went and poured gasoline on it, which I know we'll talk about it in a little bit later about the effects of the pandemic, but this is not new. This is not something that is made up, nor is it a trend that's going to go away once we open up all of the doors and take the mask off. No, it is here to stay because it is a result of the systems that we have in the place and the process in which we go about our daily lives. So it's a very real thing, and we need to have as many conversations as it takes to start to really change and disrupt this system.
Love that. Thank you so much for sharing the definition. And I like how you talked about chronic untreated stress. Like, what does that look like? Because as I think about as I think about that, I was trying to figure out like how long did I go experiencing stress before I figured out that it was burnout or whatever the case might be. So like, do you mind kind of unpacking that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a big one to unpack. So, stress itself has its own cycle. It's really like a stress curve. So, there's something as early as like not enough stress where you're super laid back and don't do anything. There's this ideal state of stress, which is the stress that pushes you to perform, to learn, to grow, to expand. That is an optimal level of stress. And that's especially where people who are like high performers typically function. It pushes you to do more or to do better, shall I say. Then you start to have a tipping point where you start to reach a point where it's no longer just performance based stress. It is a point where it can push you to states of exhaustion. And that is where that slippery slope turns in. And then all of a sudden you're in the next loop of the roller coaster, which is burnout. It can be hard to discern when you're going from one to the other because life is lifing, is what I like to call it. So my story really started like 4 years ago when I started on this path. It was unexpected. I never thought I'd be talking about burnout. I did not grow up in a household that talked about mental health and wellness or taking a break. I am from Detroit. That is in my DNA, the hustle, the grind. I grew up in a household where we worked, and then when we were tired, we worked more, and then we worked to get out of work. And so since I could have a job, I had three. I like that's who I was and who I am fundamentally. And so 4 years ago, I was in a situation where it started as an amazing career opportunity, turned into what I realized became textbook burnout ready conditions. And I was just blindsided by it. And I was in a situation where working harder was the last thing I should do and was no longer working. And so that is what caused me to pay attention. But I had some of those early signs, like I was no longer sleeping. I was neglecting basic needs, like not eating when I was supposed to. All of a sudden, not only is breakfast not happening, but lunch ain't happening. And you're lucky if I eat dinner. Some underlying things or conditions that I didn't even realize I had started to not be underlying. Anxiety being one of the biggest ones. I already talk fast, but imagine speeding this up 3 times. And I could not slow it down. I was no longer getting rest or relaxation in my normal points of relief. So, massage table is my happy place. Like it is where I need to go to relax because I keep all my stress in my body and I need it. I'm the like put your elbow in it type person. And that is what helps me relax. And I had a couple years ago gotten into yoga, but I was finding myself on my mat, but my mind was somewhere else. And it was like the places that I went for escape were not escapes anymore. And then I started to really experience those deep depths of burnout where I started to question everything about myself. Not what is the point, but like, am I adding value? Am I as smart as I thought I was? So on and so forth. And the list goes on. And so I was so used to ignoring things because everything will be fine. People have it harder than me. Life isn't that bad. And I was blessed to even be where I was despite. And so it can be hard to recognize it because so often I find people are discounting and comparing their stress to others versus recognizing the impact that it is having on them and their way of being. And so if you are noticing you're feeling off by whatever way that you define it, typically people don't have the words at the start. But if you're finding you're off from your norm, only you know that. And if you're finding it's not going away, that is an indicator that something is off and you need to start paying attention. What I appreciate talking about burnout is that burnout is a precursor to a whole lot worse shit that can come along without if you don't pay attention to it. And so, as I said, stress is a precursor to burnout. Burnout can be a precursor or a companion of other things. As I said, anxiety, depression, other mental health, other physical health things that all of a sudden you pay attention then, but what if you could pay attention before and actually avoid, mitigate, or prevent those things? So hopefully that answers your question and gives even more context to why I do what I do.
Yes, and you had so much information packed in there. I was taking notes as you were talking. I think the thing that stood out for me is, well, so much, but I think specifically high achieving. You talked about how you identify with that, and many doc students can probably fit into that space of being high achieving, right? Excelling in all areas of their lives, academic, workplace, all of those kinds of things. Doc students like pursuing your doctorate. I think too, you alluded to some different signs in terms of like, not sleeping well, sacrificing yourself for productivity or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, and then not finding the same benefits or reprieve that you typically had in things that would, kind of center you as things that would be keys to looking at to see like, oh, okay, something's off. But then also knowing who you are and what the norms are for yourself, and, not really comparing yourself to other people, but comparing yourself to you to know like something's off and I need help. So I really appreciate that. And I a lot of what you shared is similar to some things that I know I was dealing with too, and continue to deal with. So this conversation is as much for me as it is for the audience. But totally appreciate this. I want to even dig a little deeper, because as a Black woman, you identify as Black too. Like, how does burnout impact women of color specifically, right? Because this podcast is about women of color, Black women, Asian women, Latinx women, so how does burnout impact us specifically?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked because I especially like to shed light here because there's a lot of research being done in burnout and a lot of conversations, but we're often overlooked and as the nuance within it because it is all encompassing. What I like to say, quote I made up for this one, is burnout doesn't discriminate, but it does have its favorites. And we are the favorites. And when you look at it, we being women of color, and especially Black women, when you look at data across anything, Black women were always at they got the brunt of it. So why would this be any different? So burnout is like added pressure. It's added stress, it's added pressure, it's all of the above. And when you think about what creates it, all things being equal, all things being equal. I often come at it from a workplace. So let me give you that caveat. I talk about burnout primarily from a workplace burnout. As I said, since I could have a job, I had three. So career and work is very important to my life, though we are changing our relationships. But that is not the only way that burnout can manifest. There are other types of burnout. There's caregiver burnout, relationship burnout, parental burnout. How I speak about it is burnout can happen in any part of your life that you are giving a lot. And burnout is what happens when you try to give more than what you have to give. So that's like a not a textbook definition, but a way to just think about it. So for women of color, especially professional women of color, you're dealing with the same stuff that everybody else is dealing with. You have to perform, you have to produce, you have due dates, you have teams, you have expectations, you have all of that. And then you have that wonderful nuance of microaggressions in the workplace. Working 2 times or 3 times as hard to get half as far. People questioning if you should be there and everything that you deliver. Understanding the code switching and am I going to fit in this? Can I bring my whole self? Do I want to bring my whole self? Do they deserve my whole self? Am I good enough? And then I know I'm good enough, but I'm still dealing with X, Y, and Z. Insert clip of Supreme Court hearing. So all of those things are happening, but you already have the stress that everybody else has of just doing the job or just doing whatever you're supposed to be doing. And so burnout and Black women are like frenemies. They like us, but we don't like them. And half the time you don't even know that you're a frenemy because you don't know that that's not supposed to be in your life, because they've always been there. And so it literally took for Burnout had to like sit me down for me to realize what was going on, and it had to bring its other friends to the party for me to say, oh no, this is not okay, and I'm not okay with it. And like, I had my experiences in the middle of what I call lifing. So that is where the notch starts to turn up. For me, my version of lifing was my dad dealing with cancer, and so aging ailing parent happens to a lot of us. That's a part of lifing. Dual income households. I met my husband in B school, so we're both like trying to build our career. So we're moving across the country multiple times. That comes with its own stress. Shifting in value systems of, do I really want to do this anymore? I was told I'm supposed to move up, but that don't look fun. So all of those things was my version of lifing, but we all go through our versions and different times of it being. So if you're dealing with that while also having like high pressure in the workplace, like that is just combustible. And so that is what we're finding is really happening in over the past 3 years, and why all of a sudden everybody's talking about burnout. Though before the pandemic, 77% of professionals were reporting dealing with it, but it's because the world is imploding and we have no choice because the pressure is too high. And those outlets we discussed, not only are they not working, they haven't been available.
More gems. I don't even know where to start. I especially the piece about what is it? We're frenemies. We are.
Oh, we're frenemies, but we realized we didn't need that friend in our life, but they always been there.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that resonates with me so much. Or that, Black women are burnout's favorite. Wow. That is a lot to digest. And I think you're right. A lot of times we give, and we're kind of wired that way to where sometimes by the time we realize, that we're in this state of burnout, like it can be a little too late, right? Like, or it just really, I'm like a big fan of the NAP ministry and what she pushes out, right? And I think there's a lot of messaging that goes out there that tells us that it's not okay for us to take breaks. It's not okay for us to care for ourselves, right? In that kind of way, which we kind of internalize, and we don't sit down. And sometimes it takes something to sit us down, right? To your point about what you shared, and just the amount of pressure that's on us for so many different ways. A lot of our family members are depending on us. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves, but then we're in these places a lot of times, which you kind of talked about, which make us feel like we don't belong. So then we give even more, even though the level that we're giving at is 80 times more than what the mediocre white man is doing, right? So, but we won't go there.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on something you said because I forget this sometimes. I got into this work because of what I was dealing with. So I really started going down this path to find my own solution because I just knew someone right, and I don't like to sit in things that don't feel right, and it was frustrating, as you can imagine. And I felt lost and alone, and I usually can come up with something. And I knew I wasn't myself. And then once you get into the later stages of burnout, it's like, oh, you have no choice because and that's typically when people start to pay attention is when they have no choice but to, because that's where you need to take longer breaks, or you need to totally disrupt or change your life, or like all relationships are jarred. And we can talk even more about those later stage symptoms if we want. But I started to go down the path, and I knew mental health was something. I didn't know really what it was, but I jokingly say I thank Whitney Gilbert and Different World for showing it to me, because relax, relate, release. Yes, I didn't know anything else about therapy. And then some coworkers were talking about it because that's what they did, others. And so I became interested in it. I've always cared about like self assessments and self awareness and that type of stuff. But as I started going on that path, I realized like the system was so flawed and like friction filled to get the support. And so while I was trying to figure that out, I was like, I can't wait. So what else can I do? And so I really started down this journey by using the tools and resources and frameworks that I use at work. So my career is in like brand management, innovation. And so I was like, I know how to create a brand. I know how to create new concepts and like all that stuff. And I was like, well, what if I treated myself like a brand or like a new concept? What is my unmet consumer needs? What are my deep insights? What are the things that I want to do? What is my base concept? And I started to like employ those things and then merge it with mental health as I started to build connections with other people in mental health and wellness field. And that is the crux of how I do the work that I do. Like Hooky Wellness, as I said, one stop for burnout relief. I truly take design thinking, mental wellness, and real life application and bring it all together and create these tools, frameworks, and pathways because it shouldn't be this hard. Like, it's hard enough. Burnout is hard enough, but your path to relief shouldn't be as hard as it is. It's like we don't want people to heal or something. Who would have thought that? Or we don't want people to change. So that's one thing. I would say another point is I'm blessed to be like the baby of three girls in my family, and then my mother and my grandmother. And so I had the benefit of watching them and seeing the result of them giving so much of themselves. And there was really a breakthrough moment like 4 years ago where I was like, but were you happy though? Like, but were you happy though? Like, we talk so much and we're like, similar to how people will talk about our grandparents were together and divorced and blah, blah, blah. You'd be like, but were they happy though? But my grandmother and my mom and all this, and I'm not saying necessarily for mine, they stayed at home and they did this for the kids and they did this and they did that. But were they happy though? And so I like get to points where I refuse to build a life where I'm not going to be happy. Like, and I did that in undergrad. I was a declared engineer for 2 years because that's what I did. I did it from like sixth grade through. And then one day I was like, I don't like this. I do not like this. I was like, I'm not going to have my career and 40 years later be like, how did I get here? Because I hate this. And so I went to career services and was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but this ain't it. And that's how I found my path into marketing management. And so similarly, at this stage of life, I was like, this ain't it. I don't know what it is, but I'm damn sure gonna do my part to try to figure it out. And then I'm gonna tap in the resources that can help me figure out what I don't know. So I think there's a lot of reckoning right now. And that has been what's happening over the past few years. And I agree, the NAP ministry, I really appreciate her work. It has opened my eyes even more because there's also been a lot of identity based trauma and unpacking of being the only in the workplace, being the only in school, being the only throughout my entire life in a lot of places that I didn't realize. And so the whole, oh, we are conditioned to work. No, truly we are. Like back in the day, we were continually called lazy if we took a break because capitalism, because slavery. And it's like, oh, no wonder. No wonder that it was demonized. No wonder, like, actually saying no is demonized and creating and enforcing your boundaries because generations before us weren't enabled or allowed to. And so we have been conditioned and it has been passed through, and then we're reaching a new point where we're realizing we can say no, we can do it, but there's a lot of unpacking and a lot of deconditioning that is happening here, and it's uncomfortable. And as much as our generation and our folks are changing, the people who are receiving the no's, they got to change too because they don't have no choice. But yes, I applaud the NAT ministry and work. I watch it, and it's a lot. It's even more revolutionary than where I'm trying to go. So I'd be like, yeah, oh, ooh, yes, girl. I did not have any idea. So even as a black woman, it's eye opening because you realize how much stuff has been like sliding by in our everyday lives.
Very true. And how much we don't need white supremacists to do the work, right? It's because it's been ingrained in society and our psyche and whatever, we're doing it. Right? We're not giving ourselves breaks. We're not doing the things. So we don't necessarily need them because we're doing it to ourselves. And so yeah, her work is so important, and I think it supplements what you're doing too. And so I really appreciate your work and everything that folks are doing to make sure that we're prioritizing ourselves and that we're leaving a lot for ourselves. I think to what you're talking about is just sitting down. I think with the pandemic too, like sitting down and taking account of like where you are. And I love the whole, are you happy though? Like, okay, you're doing this, but are you happy? Like, and what's going to make you happy, and go down that path and provide or give yourself permission to go down that path. So thank you for that. Now, kind of related to that, like what are some things that people have gotten wrong about burnout?
Yeah, a couple of things people got wrong. One of the biggest ones is that they're the only ones dealing with it. It can feel very isolating and lonely. It's tied to the shame that comes in with it. And it's not like you want to broadly talk about, oh, I'm dealing with burnout. Oh, I think I'm burnout. Oh, I feel like everything I'm doing is for naught. Like, or I'm not getting rest, or I'm not doing this. Like, no one wants to talk about that. So because people weren't, you felt like it was only happening to you, and you felt, often people feel like they're a failure when they deal with it. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, sometimes make them. And so even once I started doing the work that I do, I was still dealing with shame of talking about the work I do and some of the story of why I was doing, like, even in this space, because we're supposed to have it figured out, right? Like, if you're used to getting all A's, then what happens when you don't? Like, if you're not on the honor roll, but oh, when life is just happening to you, but people don't talk about it that way. So one is that it's only happening to you. Once again, before pandemic, 77% of professionals. That's professional, like white collar. That does not include like some of the social services, education, medical industry. That's a whole nother gamut where it's like just part of it, just expect it. Another thing that people get wrong about burnout is all you need to do is take a nap. That part. So that stuff helps. Self-care helps. It is very important. Those type of things are more helpful in the early stages and for prevention. Yes, you should take naps. Yes, you should take walks. Yes, you should take breaks. Yes, you should do yoga if you like yoga. There are different styles of yoga, which is a whole nother conversation. You should do those things that help you solidify your well-being foundation. Once you start to get into those middle late stages of burnout, a nap ain't gonna do nothing. Like, if you are dealing with PTSD like symptoms of being in the workplace where your stomach drops every time you hear an outlook, been there, taking a nap ain't gonna do nothing. If you are dealing with acute depression where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, so on and so forth. If you're dealing with cognitive fog where you're no longer able to produce, and especially for doctoral students, like I couldn't fathom the impact that it's having where you're doubling down and working longer but producing half as much or a third, which is very common. One of the first reactions to early stage burnout is people start working more because you're not producing as much, so you're trying to catch up. But if you're finding yourself where that's accelerating in the cycle and that is completely off, that is exactly when you should take a break. That is exactly when you should up your wellness. That is exactly when you should start increasing your introspection, because cognitive fog is a true symptom or a potential symptom of burnout, and it is often overlooked. And people often just say, I think I'm getting stupid. No, you're not. You are actually dealing with brain fog. And so when you're finding yourself dealing with those later things, though anywhere in the system slash any part of life, mental health is the number one thing you could do. Having a therapist can help you navigate those things because they can sometimes be tied to deeper other things in your life that have happened in your past that you don't know or connected, especially if you've never treated certain things, if you haven't paid attention, if you're not used to dealing with your feelings. They can help you unpack it and connect the dots. But that, like, mental health is and therapy is a number one thing that can help you with that. In self awareness and introspection is another big thing. I did not grow up talking about my feelings, thinking about it. So a way you can start is journaling. If you do not take any type of self assessment of how you're feeling, like, you'll never know, and then you can't do anything about it. We know you're smart. You are working on some deep papers about solving some of the world's problems. And one of the number one things you do is figure out what is the problem at hand. If you figure out what the problem is, then you can start to build and test different solutions. And so it's the same thing when it comes to burnout or any this space, because burnout looks different for everyone. It does not show up the same way. It has different faces and it is a cycle. So it is not one and done, which is another common thing people believe is that, oh, I double burnout and I beat it and it's gone. You'd be like, oh, yeah, you can believe that. Burnout is situational. And so it can repeat itself. It can show up. It can accelerate. You can be at different parts of that cycle. And so having a level of self awareness on how symptoms can manifest in you, how your body and how you can react to certain situations, what are trigger points, once again, things that therapy can help you with, self introspection can help you with, that can help you get over that other misconception is that it's only a one time thing. Sorry to tell you. Been there, done that, still working through it. I can see it coming. That is the thing, is I now know what are those triggers, what are the ways that I can see when the flame is going up, and I know how to adapt within it, because different things in life, different situations in life can bring about different behaviors and symptoms. So I get challenged when it's conversations about like eliminating burnout. I would love that. How are we gonna do that? How we do that? Like, is capitalism gonna fall apart like tomorrow? And so I'm an optimistic realist in the matter of, okay, capitalism may not change, but what are some of those systems and processes that we can start to change within it? What are the things we can do within ourselves and our personal sphere of influence to start to change those behaviors? Because if you start to create boundaries and start to enforce your boundaries, then those around you, in a sense, have no choice but to change them. And if they don't change them, then you have the option to change your environment into a place that allows you to do that. And so I'm very much a bottoms up person. I am not a burn it all down, though they keep messing with me. I might change, but if we can start to change these things, we can start to untangle this wonderful whatever it is. I don't know what we want to call it. Whatever it is that is tangled, we can start to untangle it together.
No, I love that. I love everything that you shared. Seeking therapy, the help of a mental health therapist to help you untangle things, to help you find out what some of those triggers are. Like you said, you're able now to see when it's about to happen, and now you have tools that enable you to tackle those things, and that everything looks different for everyone. And knowing too that just because you have probably made it through one cycle of burnout or one episode of burnout, that depending on the situation, it can return, it can come back with a vengeance or not, who knows? And that we have the power to change our environment if the environment could be the trigger, whether it's your academic program, maybe it's your workplace. And so really, really appreciate that. So with that, how have like some of your ideas around burnout kind of like evolved over the years, especially with the start of the COVID-19 pandemic? And we're very much in it, even though folks are acting like it's not happening, right? How have those things changed? Because I know a lot of clients that I deal with and some of the listeners too, they're really impacted by that. They are experiencing some of what you talked about, like maybe they'll sit down for 4 hours at a coffee shop where they would typically knock out however many words, and they're not able to because of everything that you've kind of talked about, the burnout, the fog, all of that. So like what has changed, and what should we be aware of with this whole pandemic?
Yeah, everything has changed, girl. I wish I had a better answer. Everything has changed, and it actually caused me to have to take a step back on my work for a while because I mean it's happening to me too. And the things that I thought I knew, and the solutions and resources and paths that I was working on, I was like, oh, this ain't. I don't know if this is enough. And so there's been a lot of unlearning and unpacking that has happened. And so COVID just added a whole bunch of pressure and not enough relief. And that is what we're dealing with constantly. And so my ideas around it, it's not even my ideas around burnout, but my ideas around relief and how we can get there have evolved and have really pushed me to think even more creatively and to think even and create more urgent based solutions. So one of the biggest things is that burnout is often viewed as an individual issue. Burnout is a result of systemic, collective, and individual issues. Systemic structures, collective behavior, and individual actions can really create burnout. But where we are right now is we don't really have the luxury of just individual based solutions. We got to work together because it's no longer, I mean, 77% is pretty high, but it's no longer even 77. No, we had 100. Everybody's dealing with some elevated stage of burnout at the same time. And so we don't have, okay, when you get to the later stages of burnout, truly one of the solutions that does help is like, no, you need to stop. You need to stop. You need to step away. Like that is what happened with me. I took short-term disability leave. I was on leave for a while because I just couldn't. I got to a point where I just couldn't. And that was truly like how I started to understand the importance of taking a break and how I really got to the crux of Hooky Wellness and why I named it. Like my therapist put me on timeout, and I'm not joking. I was on leave. She said, how's it going? I said, I put down one laptop and I grabbed another. And she said, we not here for that. You are on timeout. And so that is how I had to learn it. That is awesome that some of us are afforded the opportunity to have benefits like short-term disability leave, to have sabbaticals and have that. The problem is when 100% of people are dealing with elevated stages of burnout, we can't all stop. And the way a lot of our bank accounts are set up, we also can't all stop, and we can't all eat, love, pray, and run away to Bali. So how do we function? And so the focus on how do we function through a elevated stage of burnout while still maintaining and doing stuff, and what are those practical solutions? That's where my mind has evolved to. Like, all right, you can't take a break, but what can you do? What can you pull back? How can we set more greater boundaries? How can we reset expectations? How can we look at more clearly what success looks like? Never before has it been so important to look at the 80 for the 20. Do not try to get to 100. We ain't got time for that. What is the 80 for the 20? What is going to bring you the greatest impact? Because that's all that you have to give. And so doing that collectively, thinking about it more strategically as a unit, is how we can start to really change, because everyone needs relief at the same time. And we don't have the same space to do what we used to do. That's how it's evolved. Also, like, I'm very curious about the research I've not started to look at, but curious to see the research that will be forthcoming about basically diversity and burnout, or like cultural impact and burnout, and like the stuff that has been happening at the world. Because I can tell you from my own personal experience, that was a whole nother level of weight that I wasn't ready for. That just made everything a little more challenging. So just the drivers, I think, are changing every day. So those are some of the things that have evolved because of the pandemic.
No, definitely the global impact, especially with everything that happened with the summer of 2020 and everything that institutions and companies have, made statements about or commitments to and aren't holding up their end of the bargain, or using people of color to really push these agendas when it's not necessarily a priority. That's a whole other podcast for sure. I appreciate you sharing that. And I think you're right. We're at 100%. All of us are in burnout. So, what does that mean for us? And I like this idea of doing it collectively. And it made me think about women of color doctoral students and how can we push back on the ideas that center on productivity. I think I've mentioned on this podcast before that I'm really trying to not use productivity as a measure of success, which is super hard for me as someone who used to get happy from checking things off their to-do list. That was like my source of happiness. And I think a lot of people, identify with that. And so how do we push back on this idea of productivity?
Yeah. And I would say my thinking on this is constantly evolving. I'm not so much in the camp of productivity is being removed from my vocabulary. I like had to do some unpacking. I started to go down that path and I was like, no, I care about work. Like, I can't just all of a sudden change who I am. It is a central part of my being. Now, I don't live to work, and it is not all that I am, but it is a facet and an important facet to me of who I am. So if I'm going to have that, I'm going to be focusing on something that is actually important and has impact and that I'm passionate about. I'm not using my skills for some BS. I'm not using it just to make the white man rich. Like, I'm no longer doing that, but I am going to still produce because it is important to me. And then also, when it comes to productivity, what I define as productivity is also evolving. I think if we look at productivity and using some of the past views of it, of just like work and deliverables and that type of stuff, yeah, I would take it out of my vocabulary too, or figure out what's the new language. For me, productivity also is including how am I supporting myself? How am I making sure that I'm continuing to develop, continuing to grow, and continuing to make sure that I'm feeling good along the way? And so I like my checklist. I am very much someone that will go write something down just so I can check it off and be like, yep, I did it. Bing, bing, bing. But what is on there will also be journaling, because I want to make sure that I am making a priority for that. For me, taking walks is how, like, my physical fitness, that and other things that have to do with the other facets of me, I'm putting that in the same bucket of productivity so that I can also make it a priority. So I'm not cutting it from my vocabulary. I'm just evolving what it means to me.
I love that. Okay. So thank you for talking me off the ledge there. Because I love how you say that, because I do put some of these other things on my list and I check them off, like the journaling. Every morning I come up with a word of the day that sets my intention for how I want to move through that day. I want to be active as well. And so having that mixture, and also not living to work, which is the major key. So I appreciate that. How about, I know you shared some practical things that we can do, right? To, I guess it's inevitable to avoid it. Like we can't avoid burnout, right? But how can we manage it? So I know you talked about journaling, getting some exercise, creating boundaries. Do you have like any other practical steps that doctoral students can take to manage burnout? And then also, too, I guess on the flip side, how can friends and family support folks who may be dealing and experiencing burnout?
Yeah. And you said something about like avoiding burnout. We can avoid or navigate situations that can induce burnout. So it's sometimes you can't, it's the situations that we need to be aware of. Like, how do we avoid the things that can create this type of a situation or condition, shall I say? So, yes, all the well-being stuff is great. I talk a lot about the 4 pillars of mental wellness. Those things are very, very important to employ. If you're like me, you'd be like, yeah, that sounds good, but I got a job to do and I got stuff, I got a paper to write. So when it comes to the practical stuff, especially when you're in situations like a doctoral students where you're like, no, I'm trying to get this done, that's where it really goes into areas of productivity and the things that will help you with it, because you have limited bandwidth, which is the biggest thing about right now. Is the bandwidth you used to have is not the bandwidth you have right now, regardless of who you are, because those things that used to take 5 minutes are now taking 20. Those things that you had like a routine for were disrupted. So very few people are working with an expanded bandwidth. So what does it all come down to? So a couple things. One, anything that you do on a regular basis, make a routine for it. It is really about, right now it's about conserving your mental energy. So if there are things where you're like, I know I'm doing this every week, what kind of routine? So it takes the guesswork out of it. It can be as simple as what days you grocery shop, how you make your list, if you clip coupons, where you shop, what time you do. Make it the same routine, then you don't have to figure out how you're going to do it every week. It's not a surprise you need to have food. It's not. Come on. So making a routine, it is something that can be overlooked because it sounds so simple, but every moment you don't have to think about that, you can think about writing your paper. Similarly, about your wellness routine, there's a reason, even like your clothes, like there's a reason Steve Jobs wore the same thing. He didn't have to think about it. And I mean, we're still in the pandemic. You still at home, like, why are you changing your clothes all the time? Like, who are you dressing up for? I have like 5 pair of sweatpants and a lot of hoodies. I need I miss a lot of my closet, but isn't necessary. It's a lot of times. So thinking about the things that you can make routines that make you feel that you feel comfortable with, so you can take out that extra guesswork. 80 for the 20, I was not playing. Like, what is really important? What is important for you to put your time on? When you're coming to writing your paper, like, you have a timeline, try to stick to it. If you are having challenges with it, if you're dealing with cognitive fog, if you're dealing with procrastination, if you're falling behind, get accountability buddies. Y'all can all help each other because you wouldn't be the only one. That stuff is hard anyway. So if you don't already have an accountability partner or accountability buddy, find one, create a group. If y'all need to be in the same space to get work done, do it. I've seen a lot of that work happening, even virtually, where people are like, you know what, we're just going to jump on the Zoom and we're not talking, but we're going to do X, Y, and Z at the same time together. So I'm very much about tricking your body and your mind to doing the things you need to do when you know that you're not, because it don't help you and it don't help nobody around you if you keep lying to yourself. Like, because you're just gonna get more frustrated and more frustrated, and then you're gonna be like, oh my god, I'm so far behind, and your timeline isn't shifting to that. If you need to shift your timeline, I don't actually know about what type of flexibility, but if you have flexibility and you're finding you just cannot meet it, be real with yourself and be like, okay, if I can't do this, instead of digging yourself in the ground, beyond burning yourself out and dealing with any type of internal negative talk, like, what is a realistic timeline? And if you can shift it, talking to your advisors to see if there's some flexibility for that. And then last but not least is like checking in with your advisors more often, so you can eliminate going down a path too far and then being told, oh, you off track. So if you can make more regular, earlier check-ins to make sure that the time, energy, and effort you are putting into it, it's taking you in the right direction, those are some real practical, like, action-oriented ways to avoid situations that can very much lead to burnout. And then friends and family, how can you support? So giving, being a support system. So if someone clearly needs to have a listening ear, be that. If you are willing or are able to listen and bring it to carry that, Be very transparent. If you're like, I can just listen, and be ready to just listen. You don't have to solve, and communicate that. If someone has said that they want to get a therapist, once again, I'm very much pro therapy. Everyone deserves to have someone who listens to them, though everyone doesn't like it. And all therapists are not great. So make sure to shop around. But if someone is simple, if you have the bandwidth to help, if someone keeps saying they're going to do it for them. Be like, I will call, I will make your appointments, like little things like that. Helping pick up little projects that they might not have time to, but you see them getting into that negative spiral. If it's a matter of a short period of time, is there extra weight that you can carry for them? So within the household, are there things, maybe your wife used to, or is typically the one who cooks dinner. Maybe you cook it 2 or 3 times a week, so she don't have to worry about it. Maybe it's the childcare, maybe it's the shopping. So little things like that sound like little things, but can really add up. And it's like one less thing that a person has to do. And then being honest, like if that person seems off, if you are a trusted friend or family, tell them you care and be like, hey, something seems awry. Something seems awry. And you don't be a jerk about it, because burnout can create a lot of defensiveness. But it can also create blinders where it's very, very hard for that person to see what is going on and the behavior that they are showing. So if you are trusted, can do it in a caring way, lend a helping hand by saying, hey, you good? And then finding their way to some other expert support that might be able to help them, or like get them a journal, and maybe y'all do it together where it's all of a sudden a household thing where we're going to get in touch with our feelings. They don't need to know. It will help you as well. So those are a couple things in both camps.
Love it. Love it. Love the piece about advocating for yourself and asking for the time that you need, extra time that you need from your advisors, being realistic about your deadlines. And I love the practical piece about helping however you can, especially for those of us that are high achieving or whatever. Nothing's too small. A lot of times we may not ask for help at all. And so if you see someone drowning or having a hard time managing all of the things, which there's no shame in that. With today's society, we are managing things that are not manageable a lot of the times, right? And so cooking for them, ordering them some food. I saw something the other day on Instagram about like sending someone on Uber Eats something, and then that way they don't have to worry about it. So all of these things are super thoughtful and things that take the stress off of folks. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing such great practical advice. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Hooky Day. You mentioned this as one of your signature things that you are known for, or that you put out there as the Burnout Whisperer. So tell us all about it and how it impacts burnout.
Yeah, so Hooky Day. Yes, taking a Hooky Day. So Hooky Day is actually a campaign that I created. So it's like the third Tuesday of October. We've done it for the past 3 years. Very grassroots effort, but it is truly a professional skip day for your mental health and well-being. And similar, it really came around the vein of, just like I said, my therapist put me on timeout. I was like, stop working constantly. Do anything else. And that we talk about how we never have time. Oh, I wish, I want to take a time for myself. And so Hooky Day is really a way to say, all right, we're not going to wish, we're just going to do it together. And so Hooky Day, once again, third Tuesday in October, but it's really a day for you to repurpose for you. You could do whatever your body needs. So if it's laying in your bed or laying on the couch and binging some TV that is mindless, that's fine. It's your day. If it's a matter of checking out that new yoga class, or you said you wanted to take a pottery class, or you wanted to go to the museum, or you wanted to do a brunch on a Tuesday, or if you want to explore your neighborhood, it's really about anything, because it's a matter of reclaiming your time, literally. Thank you, Maxine Waters. Like, we talk about mental health days, we talk about PTO, but like, why don't we just have fun? And so I didn't grow up taking Hooky Days. Like, it's not at all what I grew up, and often people think about Ferris Bueller, and so it gets a bad rap. But when I was thinking about, way back when I was just thinking about Hooky Day, I was like, but when you mention it to people, people smile, because Hooky Days are often where memories are made, and people talk about it like, oh yeah, I remember my parents took me out of school and we went to the museum, or we did this, or we went to the amusement park. Oh, we did this and we explored, or we learned something. So it's where you learn, it's where you grow, it's where you have fun. And so Why not? I want to have a hooky day. And you take it, and I'm tricking you into a mental health day. So you're welcome. So it's not about slacking, but it is about choosing you. So each year, it's basically just professionals from across the country choose this day to take it off. If you don't have the benefit or option of taking that specific day, it's really about the action of putting a day on your calendar and committing it to yourself. I choose Tuesdays because Tuesdays is the most regular day of the week. We take Mondays off, we take Fridays off all the time. Thursdays, almost the weekend. Wednesday's hump day. Tuesday is just a normal day where it's always about work. So make it about you. So it's we're driving the biggest action. So, and then each year we also partner with different wellness brands and often give discounts to help people. And we also have been giving you permission slips so you can feel a little bit better about it. So Hooky Day is coming. You can follow Hooky Wellness on Instagram, as well as myself, Burnout Whisper on Instagram, and I'll start talking about it in the coming months. And then hopefully next year we'll do it even more regularly. But right now it is in October. So yeah, that and it impacts burnout. It's really about those small steps, just starting to change your behavior. And instead of saying I'm gonna, one day I will, now it's a matter of let's just go do it together.
Love it. And I think I need to make a commitment to like a hooky day once a month too. But for sure in October, I will be doing that.
That's exactly what it's about. And I will say I'm not even as good as every month. I will definitely do it every quarter, but it's one day. Like you really, because half the times your weekends are taken up by more work or household tasks. So when are you choosing you? And so I'm all about put it on your calendar. If it's on your calendar, it'll actually happen. So putting them on your calendar in advance helps you do that because then it's on there. Your day's already blocked. So yes, monthly. Let's go. I'm here for it.
I love it. And I think when I was looking at your website, you had like a out of office too that people can use where it's like, it's not a secret. I'm playing hooky. So you'll catch me on the next day.
Yeah, and especially if you're a people manager, it's a way to like walk the talk because there's a lot of conversation about, oh, how can I get my employees to actually take advantage of their benefits? You do it. And then you tell them that you did it and you don't have shame with it. Like as long as your job is done, as long as you're delivering what you need to deliver, you need to take care of yourself as well. So, yes, on the website, there is actually a Hooky Day toolkit. So, there's some out of office messages, there's suggestions on what you can do with your day. There's a checklist of like how to prepare to be out of the office, all that stuff that gets in the way of and adds to the shoulda, coulda, woulda. Here you go do it. Here's your toolkit. So you can sign up and declare your day and get the toolkit for free on hookywellness.com.
Awesome. I'll also put that in the show notes. I'll put, I know you mentioned how folks can follow you on Instagram, but how can folks work with you too? Like if they're needing some assistance with burnout and figuring out how to create these boundaries and how to influence things in the workplace, or maybe even have you as a speaker to talk to leadership about burnout and how they can support their workers, how can they do so?
Perfect. That's exactly what I'm here for. So you can go to Hooky Wellness, HOOKY, wellness.com to learn more about our support. So I do all of the above, helping individuals and organizations. So within the organizations, there's workshops, there's trainings, there's courses, speaking engagements, wellness experiences, concierge service, well-being concierge. So I've been blessed to work with orgs and workplace teams at orgs, including Google, Deloitte, Accenture, Moet Hennessy, so Tulane University, Indiana University. So if you are a high performance environment, I am here to help, giving you practical tools and solutions. And then as an individual, also on the site. So we're turning up our individual support. So creating burnout snapshots, battle plans, providing you expert support, concierge. So once again, you can learn about it at Hooky Wellness. Join the email list because you always find out what's coming first. And as I said, following on Instagram, that is the platform where I'm most active for both. We have handles on others, but we might not be there because it's about boundaries and it's about recognizing your bandwidth. So Insta is what we do right now.
Love it. And I will tag all of that in the show notes. So definitely check Erayna out. She is lovely. I've loved this conversation and it's just exceeded my expectations. You shared so many practical tips that folks can use. So I appreciate you being on the show and sharing your expertise. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great to be here.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Writing on My Mind podcast. If you'd like to support the podcast, make sure you follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts, rate the show, and leave a comment on Apple Podcast. You can also donate to the show by clicking the support link in the show notes. Your donations help me to continue to put out new episodes to help support you and other women of color doctoral students. I'd also love it if you could spread the word to other women of color doctoral students to grow our community. Be sure to also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Dr. Emanuela. That's DrEmmanuela. See you on the next episode.